Racist cops, handcuff black judge at airport. What she did changed airport security forever. Judge Lorraine Whitmore, a 56-year-old African-American federal judge, faced a humiliating injustice at a Washington, D.C. airport security checkpoint. Selected for a random screening, she endured invasive scrutiny and suspicion far beyond what white passengers experienced. Her calm assertion of her judicial status was met with disbelief, escalating into wrongful detention and threats. This act of subtle discrimination rooted in racial bias stripped a respected jurist of her dignity in a public space. Yet Lorraine's resilience and quiet strength shone through, hinting at her capacity to turn this violation into a catalyst for accountability. The incident, though shocking, exposed systemic flaws in airport security protocols, raising questions about fairness and the abuse of power. Would her ordeal spark change, or would it fade into the noise of bureaucracy? Her story is one of courage against indignity, a reminder that even those in high positions can be reduced to stereotypes in moments of prejudice. The morning sun filtered through the airport's glass walls, casting soft shadows on Lorraine Whitmore's navy blazer as she stood in the security line. At 56, her presence was understated. Her short, silver-streaked hair neatly pinned, her glasses perched low on her nose. She carried a worn leather briefcase, its edges scuffed from years of courtroom battles. To others, she was just another business traveler blending into the hum of rolling suitcases and murmured conversations. Lorraine preferred it that way. A private woman, she traveled alone, no entourage, no fuss, savoring the quiet moments before her meetings on criminal justice reform in D.C. Her routine was deliberate, a quick coffee black sipped while reviewing case notes. Today, the aroma mingled with the sterile tang of airport air. Her fingers traced the encrypted USB in her pocket, a repository of sensitive judicial data. As a federal judge, she'd seen the worst of humanity, families torn by incarceration, lives undone by systemic bias. Those memories weighed on her, fueling her resolve to reform a broken system. Yet she craved peace, a life unburdened by conflict. When the TSA officer waved her forward for a random screening, her stomach tightened. She sensed the scrutiny wasn't random at all. Shock flickered, then steadied into calm resolve. She wouldn't stay silent. With a deep breath, she stepped forward, determined to challenge the injustice brewing. The security checkpoint buzzed with the monotony of routine metal detectors, beeping trays, clattering travelers shuffling forward. Lorraine stood in the cordoned-off screening area, her briefcase open on a steel table. Officer Grant, a wiry man in his mid-30s with a clipped voice, rifled through her belongings. His gloved hands lingered on her legal documents, flipping pages with exaggerated care. Around her, white passengers breezed through with perfunctory pat-downs, their bags barely glanced at. The disparity stung like a paper cut, sharp, insidious, undeniable. Grant's eyes narrowed at the encrypted USB nestled in her briefcase. What's this company's secret's passwords? His tone carried a challenge, as if her presence demanded justification. Lorraine's pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. I'm a judicial officer. These documents are under federal jurisdiction. She met his gaze, her brown eyes unyielding behind her glasses. Grant scoffed, his lips curling. Her simple blazer and lack of a visible badge seemed to fuel his skepticism. Judicial officer, huh? We'll see about that. He waved over a colleague, ordering the USB and her laptop taken to a secondary inspection room. The room was stark, its fluorescent lights humming faintly. Lorraine's phone and briefcase were placed out of reach. When she requested a call to her office, Grant snapped, "No calls. If you're stubborn, we'll escalate this to federal TSA. You could be detained." The threat hung heavy like damp air before a storm. Lorraine's chest tightened, but she held her ground. "I won't sign anything without an attorney. This violates the Constitution." Her words were soft but firm, a quiet defiance rooted in years of upholding the law. Outside, the airport churned on, indifferent. Travelers glanced away, avoiding the scene. A female TSA officer misread Lorraine's attempt to open the ACLU app on her phone as filming. "Drop it," she barked. Grant's hand shot to his stun gun, his voice raising. "On the ground, you're resisting." Lorraine froze, her heart pounding. She hadn't raised her voice, hadn't moved aggressively, yet the situation spiraled. Airport police arrived, their boots thudding on the tile. Handcuffs clicked around her wrists, cold and tight. To onlookers, she was just a black woman with suspicious documents, her identity erased by assumption. The absurdity of it all burned. She'd spent decades defending justice, yet here she was reduced to a stereotype in a sterile room. No one questioned Grant's authority. No one asked for her side. The injustice wasn't just in the cuffs, it was in the silence of the crowd, the casual dismissal of her rights. As she was led to the security office, her resolve hardened. This wouldn't end quietly. What did you think of Lorraine's story so far? Like, comment, and subscribe to follow her fight for justice. The security office was a claustrophobic box, its gray walls stained with years of neglect. Lorraine sat on a hard plastic chair, her wrists still raw from the handcuffs now removed. The air smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant, a sour mix that clung to her throat. Her briefcase and phone lay on a desk across the room, out of reach, like relics of a life momentarily stolen. The hum of a distant air conditioner was the only sound, broken occasionally by the crackle of a radio outside. She was alone save for the weight of her thoughts and the sting of betrayal, not just by Officer Grant, but by the system she'd served for decades. Lorraine's mind churned. She'd faced prejudice before, whispers in courtrooms, skeptical glances at conferences, but this was different. This was public raw, a violation that stripped her title and reduced her to a suspect. Her chest ached with a familiar hurt, one that echoed her childhood in a segregated neighborhood where her father's warnings about knowing your place had been a survival mantra. Yet resilience was her armor. She'd clawed her way through law school, faced down hostile attorneys, and earned her judgeship through grit. She wouldn't break now. Still, the isolation gnawed. No one in the bustling airport had intervened. Travelers had averted their eyes, their silence louder than Grant's accusations. A young couple had hurried past, heads down as she was led away in cuffs. A businessman had glanced up from his phone, then back down as if her ordeal was just another inconvenience. The female TSA officer who'd misread her phone use hadn't apologized. Her face had stayed blank, detached. Lorraine's fingers twitched, wanting to reach for her glasses, a nervous habit, but she kept them folded in her lap. She wouldn't show weakness. Her thoughts drifted to the USB, its encrypted contents now a source of suspicion. It held drafts of her reform proposals, ideas to reduce sentencing disparities, to humanize a justice system that too often dehumanized. The irony was bitter. She was detained for the very work meant to protect others from injustice. Grant's words echoed in her mind. Company secrets, his tone dripping with disdain. She saw his face again, his eyes narrowing not at the USB but at her, as if her blackness itself was the threat. The memory sparked a quiet rage tempered by her training to stay composed. She closed her eyes, picturing her courtroom, the polished wood of her bench, the weight of her gavel. There she was. Judge Whitmore, respected, authoritative. Here she was just a woman, her identity erased by bias. The contrast cut deep, but it also steeled her. She wouldn't let this define her. Her fingers brushed the edge of her blazer, grounding her. She thought of her late husband, who'd always said, "Lorraine, you're tougher than the toughest storms." She held on to that, a lifeline in the sterile room. The door creaked open and a new officer entered, his badge reading Granger. His eyes flicked to her, then to the file on the desk. Lorraine straightened her gaze, steady. She sensed a shift, a crack in the tension. Whatever came next, she'd face it with the same dignity that had carried her through every trial. But the question lingered, would anyone listen? Lieutenant Charles Granger's entrance shifted the room's atmosphere like a breeze breaking a stifling heat. His eyes, wide with recognition, darted from Lorraine's face to the name tag on her file. Whitmore. Whitmore, he muttered, his voice tinged with disbelief. Are you really Lorraine Whitmore, federal judge in the Southern District Court? 5 years ago, he'd sat in her courtroom, awed by her command during a high-profile case. Now, seeing her in this grim office, his face flushed with a mix of shame and urgency. Lorraine nodded, her posture regal despite the ordeal. Yes, Lieutenant, that's me. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with quiet authority. Granger's hands fumbled as he grabbed the file, flipping through it as if to confirm reality. The realization hit him like a gavel. Judge Whitmore, a pillar of the legal world, had been handcuffed and humiliated under his watch. He stammered an apology, his words tripping over themselves. Ma'am, This is a mistake, a terrible mistake. But Lorraine wasn't passive. She leaned forward, her gaze piercing. Mistake or not, Lieutenant, my rights were violated. I was detained without cause, threatened and denied counsel. This isn't just about me, it's about the system that allowed this. Her words carried the weight of her years on the bench, each syllable measured yet forceful. Granger nodded, sweat beading on his brow. He knew her reputation, a judge who'd pushed for fairness, who'd never shied from holding power accountable. Her mind raced, strategizing as if in court. She had power, not just her title, but her network. She recalled a colleague at the ACLU, a friend who documented TSA abuses. She could call them, turn this into a case study for reform. Her position gave her leverage, a voice that could echo beyond this room, but she also knew the risks publicity could invite scrutiny tarnish her carefully private life. Still, silence wasn't an option. She'd spent her career fighting for justice. This was no different. Granger, sensing her resolve, acted swiftly. "I'm stopping this now," he said, picking up the phone to halt all screenings. He ordered her belongings returned, his voice sharp with authority. Lorraine's briefcase and phone were placed before her, the USB glinting under the fluorescent light. She didn't touch them yet, her fingers resting on the table, deliberate. "I'll need a full report," she said. "Every detail of this incident, including Officer Grant's actions." Granger nodded, already summoning staff to compile records. The room buzzed with new energy officers, whispering, papers shuffling. Lorraine's presence, once diminished, now commanded the space. She thought of her reform proposals, the ones on the USB. This incident could fuel her work, shine a light on systemic bias and security protocols. But the path forward was uncertain. Would her call to the ACLU spark a broader investigation? Could she trust Granger to hold his team accountable? The answers hung in the air, suspense coiling like a spring. How do you think Lorraine and her allies will resolve this injustice? Will her actions ripple outward, or will they be contained? The security office, once a cage of humiliation, now hummed with accountability's pulse. Lieutenant Granger's orders had unleashed a flurry of activity officers. Scurried radios crackled and the faint clack of keyboards echoed as reports were drafted. Lorraine sat, her briefcase reclaimed, the encrypted USB back in her pocket. The weight of the ordeal lingered, but her dignity was slowly being restored. Granger's face, etched with remorse, met hers. "Judge Whitmore." "I've launched an internal investigation," he said, his voice steady but heavy. "We'll get to the bottom of this." Word of the incident spread like wildfire. A passenger, a young journalist waiting for a delayed flight, had overheard whispers of a judge being detained. Her post on X, tagged with airport injustice, went viral, racking up thousands of shares. The post included a blurry photo of Lorraine in handcuffs, her expression calm but resolute. Public outrage swelled, amplified by civil rights groups. The ACLU, alerted by Lorraine's colleague, issued a statement condemning the TSA's actions and demanding a federal inquiry. By evening, news outlets picked up the story, their headlines stark: "Federal judge detained in a racial profiling scandal." The investigation moved swiftly, fueled by public pressure. Security footage reviewed under Granger's oversight showed Officer Grant's aggressive demeanor, his pointed questions, his dismissive sneer as Lorraine asserted her status. Transcripts revealed his language veered into prejudice. His suspicion rooted not in evidence, but in bias. The footage also captured the indifference of other officers, their failure to question Grant's escalation. The evidence was damning, a clear violation of protocol and constitutional rights. Officer Grant faced immediate consequences. Suspended without pay, he was recommended for dishonorable dismissal, his career in tatters. The TSA issued a public apology, but Lorraine wasn't appeased. She filed a civil lawsuit not for personal gain, but to force systemic change. Her lawyer, a fierce advocate from the ACLU, argued the case exposed a pattern of racial profiling in airport security. The lawsuit named Grant, and the TSA seeking damages and mandatory retraining for all officers. The courtroom, Lorraine's familiar domain, became her battleground once more. As the legal process unfolded, Lorraine's reputation as a judge fortified her cause. Colleagues from the Southern District Court rallied, penning op-eds about her integrity. A senator on the Judiciary Committee called for hearings on TSA oversight, citing her case as a wake-up call. The public, galvanized by the viral post, launched petitions demanding accountability. Lorraine, though private by nature, became a reluctant symbol of resistance. She gave a single interview, her voice measured but firm. "This isn't about me. It's about ensuring no one else endures this indignity." By week's end, Lorraine walked out of the airport, her head high. The evening air was crisp, carrying the scent of jet fuel and possibility. She clutched her briefcase, its familiar weight a reminder of her purpose. Grant's punishment and the lawsuit were steps toward justice, but the fight was far from over. She glanced at her phone, now flooded with messages of support. The world was watching, and she wouldn't let them down. What's your take on Lorraine's victory? Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe for more stories of justice. Lorraine's victory was bittersweet, a hard-won triumph shadowed by sacrifice. The lawsuit gained traction with the TSA agreeing to settle, committing to nationwide retraining on bias and protocol. Officer Grant's dismissal was finalized. His reputation ruined a small justice for the indignity Lorraine endured, yet the cost was steep. The viral post, while galvanizing support, exposed her private life to scrutiny. Tabloids dug into her past, questioning her impartiality as a judge. Anonymous trolls on X sent vile messages accusing her of playing the race card. Her health faltered under the stress, sleepless nights, a persistent ache in her chest. She missed her late husband's steady presence, his voice to calm her storms. In her quiet D.C. apartment, Lorraine sipped tea, the steam curling like a fragile hope. She'd regained her dignity, but the scars remained. The public saw her as a hero, but she felt the weight of being a symbol. She'd never sought the spotlight. Her fight was for justice, not fame. Colleagues praised her courage, but some distanced themselves, wary of the controversy. Justice, she realized, was never clean. It came with collateral damage, strained relationships, eroded privacy, a body pushed to its limits. Still, she stood firm. The settlement funded her reform work, amplifying her voice on sentencing disparities. She spoke at a conference, her words resonating. Justice is a marathon, not a sprint. The applause was warm, but her heart ached for the ordinary life she'd lost. The victory was incomplete, a reminder that systemic change demanded endurance, not just triumph. Lorraine knew justice was never easy or perfect. She carried on her resolve unshaken, but the cost lingered like a shadow. Lorraine's fight rippled beyond the courtroom, igniting tangible change. The TSA settlement spurred new policies, mandatory bias training for officers, and stricter oversight of screening protocols. A federal task force was launched to investigate racial profiling in airports, citing her case as a catalyst. Advocacy groups inspired by her story collected thousands of signatures for a petition urging Congress to amend security laws. Media outlets shifted their lens, running exposés on systemic bias with Lorraine's ordeal as a centerpiece. Her name became a rallying cry for reform. Yet Lorraine chose quiet over acclaim. She declined most interview requests, retreating to her D.C. apartment where the scent of jasmine tea grounded her. At a small ceremony, the ACLU honored her with an award for courage, but she spoke briefly, her voice soft. This is for everyone silenced by injustice. Her work continued, her reform proposals gaining traction in policy circles. She mentored young lawyers, urging them to challenge inequity. One spring morning, Lorraine stood in her garden, sweeping fallen leaves from the path. The rhythmic scratch of the broom echoed her resolve, steady, deliberate. She paused, placing a single white rose on a small memorial for her husband, its petals bright against the earth. As she walked with neighbors to a community meeting on justice reform, the sun warmed her face, a symbol of hope rising. Change was slow, but it was real, rooted in her courage. What will you do after learning Lorraine Whitmore's story? Her fight at that D.C. airport wasn't just a moment, it was a beacon illuminating the shadows of systemic bias. Lorraine, a Black woman who rose to federal judge, faced humiliation but turned pain into purpose. Her legacy lives in the TSA's reformed policies, the task force probing racial profiling, and the young lawyers she mentors, their eyes bright with resolve. She showed that courage isn't loud. It's the quiet strength to stand firm even when the world looks away. Her story whispers to the next generation integrity matters. Fight for what's right, not for applause. In her garden, where she sweeps leaves and lays roses for her husband, Lorraine embodies resilience. Each step she takes with her community, each word she speaks on reform plants, seeds for change. Her ordeal handcuffs. Suspicion, isolation could have broken her, but instead it forged a path for others. She's not a hero on a pedestal. She's a woman who chose to act. What will you choose? Will you speak up when injustice festers or stay silent? Lorraine's legacy challenges us to be bold, to question power, to build a world where dignity isn't a privilege. As she once said, Justice is a flame small but unyielding. Carry it forward. Her words echo a call to action for you, the reader. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to keep Lorraine's fight alive. Let's honor her by acting, not just applauding. Racist cops handcuff black judge at airport. What she did changed airport security forever.